This is Dale Cantrell, pastor of the Meridianville Holiness Church. Thanks for joining us for this look into God's Word and God's lessons as we try to gain a better understanding of God's will for us. Many of us at the Meridianville Holiness Church feel like God would be pleased with us sharing our faith with our community and surrounding area. As I have said on previous messages, that I feel like that if I knew the cure for cancer and did not share it, it would be like the 4 lepers of 2 Kings 7:9, who proclaimed, "We do not well to hold our peace." This is not to replace getting to church and hearing the Word of God in person, but I hope those in the hospital, nursing home, rehab, or wherever that can't get to where the Word of God has been delivered in person could benefit from this message. My reading today is from 2 Chronicles 12:1 through 14 in the King James Version of the Bible. And it came to pass, when Rehoboam had established the kingdom and had strengthened himself, he forsook the law of the Lord and all of Israel with him. And it came to pass in the 5th year of the king Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, because they had transgressed against the Lord, with 1,200 chariots and 70,000 horsemen. And the people were without number that came with him out of Egypt, the Lubans, the Sukkams, and the Ethiopians. And he took the fenced city which pertained to Judah, and came to Jerusalem. Then Shemaiah, the prophet to Rehoboam, and the princes of Judah that were gathered together to Jerusalem because of Shishak, and said unto them, Thus saith the Lord, Ye have forsaken me, and therefore have I also left you in the land of Shishak, and the hand of Shishak. Whereupon the princes of Israel and the king humbled themselves, and they said, The Lord is righteous. And when the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, the word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, saying, They have humbled themselves. Therefore I will not destroy them, but I will grant them some deliverance. And my wrath shall not be poured out upon Israel by the hand of Shishak. Nevertheless they shall be his servants, that they may know my service, and the service of the kingdoms of the country. So Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house. He took all. He carried away the shields also of gold which Solomon had made, instead of which Rehoboam made shields of brass, and committed them to the hands of the chief of the guard that kept the entrance to the king's house. And when the king entered into the house of the Lord, the guard came and fetched them, and brought them again into the guard chamber. And when he humbled himself, the wrath of the Lord turned from him, that he would not destroy him altogether. And also in Judah things went well. So Rehoboam strengthened himself in Jerusalem and reigned, for Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Amortite. And he did evil because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. Let's go back and look at verse 9 again and see if we can get something out of this. It says, So Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, and took away the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house he took all. He carried away also the shields of gold which Solomon had made, instead of which King Rehoboam made shields of brass, and committed them to the hands of the chief of the guard that kept the entrance to the king's house. Instead of King Rehoboam trying to go back and get the king's shields of gold and get them back, he did a very unwise thing and made shields of brass. Brass, my brothers, may glitter and brass may shine, but it's not gold. It's just a poor substitute. Brass is not pure. Unlike gold, brass must be polished constantly because it tends to tarnish. Whereas gold is tempered and durable, brass was cheap and flimsy and far inferior. Rehoboam settled for less and gave God less than his best. Before we come down too hard on King Rehoboam, though, maybe we need to examine our own hearts for a moment. I suggest to you that we're often giving God brass instead of gold. How many of us have lost the gold of our lives to the enemy, to the world, to the flesh, and instead of reclaiming our lost treasures, we replace them with fake treasures. How many of us just give up on ever getting God's gold and settle for less, much less? In order for us to have the best, we must fight for it, defend it. As if our gold ever got stolen, we must hastily go and reclaim it. It reminds me of a story about David in 1 Samuel 30, 1 through 19. And it came to pass when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on the way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no more power to weep. And David's 2 wives were taken captive. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people were grieved, every man for his sons and his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord. That's the reaction we ought to have had. That's the reaction Rehoboam should have had when his gold were stolen. Just like David and these men did, they were grieved for what they lost. They didn't want to settle for less. And it goes on to say, and David said to Abiathar the priest, Amalek's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake him, and without fail recover all. So David went, he and 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Besor, where those that were left behind stayed. But David pursued, he and 400 men, for 200 abode behind, which were so faint that they could not go over the brook Besor. They found an Egyptian in the field, and brought him to David, and gave him bread, and he did eat, and made him to drink water. And they gave him a piece of cake of figs, and 2 clusters of raisins. And when he had eaten enough, his spirit came again unto him, for he had eaten no bread, nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. And David said unto him, to whom belongest thou, and whence art thou? And he said, I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite. Then my master left me, because 3 days ago I fell sick. We made an invasion upon the Cherethites, and upon the coast which belongs to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag with fire. And David said, canst thou bring me down to this company? And he said, swear unto me by God that thou wilt neither kill me nor deliver me into the hands of my master, and I will bring thee down to this company. And when he brought him down, behold, they were spread abroad upon all the earth, eating and drinking and dancing, because of the great spoil they had taken out of the land of the Philistines, and out of the land of Judah. And David smote them from twilight, and even unto evening the next day, and there escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men, which rode upon camels, and fled. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away. And David rescued his 2 wives. There was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, nor spoil, nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. David in this story could have settled for less. They could have said something like, well, they got our wives. Does anybody know how to cook or clean house? It looks like we're going to just have to make do, brothers. But they didn't do that. They cried out to God. That's what Rehoboam should have done. That's what we should do instead of settling for less. God expects us and gives us his best, and he expects and wants from us in return to give to him our best. I heard a story about a retiring builder, a man that had worked for a corporation building houses. And it came down time, and he told the corporation he wanted to retire. And they said, well, all right, just build us one more house. He didn't really want to, but they insisted. So he went through the motions and built another house. He was known throughout the country for building the best houses, having the best quality materials and the best labor. But his heart was not in this house. And he didn't use the best materials, and he didn't use the best labor. And it wasn't the quality house he had been used to building for 30 years. They had the banquet for his going away. They asked him to say something. He went up to the podium and spoke, and he started down off the podium. And I said, wait just a minute, we've got something for you. And they gave him the keys to that house that he had built, the last house he had built for him. Don't you know that if he had known that house was going to be his, he would have done a better job? Always do your best. You don't know what your labor is, who it's going to benefit. You need to do your best every time. The problem with Rehoboam is that he seems to be saying, thanks for bringing me this far, Lord. I think I can handle it from here. I had a friend that was in a vehicle, and he started running out of gas, and he called out to the Lord, and he said, Lord, please help me. Help me to make it that station. He was going down a hill, and there was a station that had gas at the bottom of it. Once he reached the top of the hill and started going down, he told the Lord, he quit crying out in prayer and said, I can make it now, Lord. And his car just quit, stopped on a dime. So don't ever think that you can make it on your own. Watching Rehoboam is like watching a schizophrenic squirrel going here and there. In verse 1, he walks away from the Lord. In verse 6, he repents. In verse 12, he humbles himself. In verse 14, we're told that he did evil. This is a picture of a life that's up and down, in and out, hot and cold, on and off. Well, you see these kind of people in life. I call these kind of people yo-yo Christians. People who do not have a clear direction or focus in their life. They cannot give God their very best. Titus 2:6 says, young men likewise exhort to be sober-minded. And in verse 7 he said, in all things showing thyself a pattern of good works, and doctrine showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity. I want to stress that it says for young men to show themselves a pattern of good works. We need that pattern of good works. If God wanted to use you, does he know where to find you? Would someone have to look for you very hard because you could be here, there, or anywhere? God is looking for stability, dependability in our lives, yours and mine. God is looking for people who are tired of the roller coaster, who want to live a stable, focused life for his glory. Look at your life right now. Is it stable and constant life, or is it filled with starts, stops, reversals, and etc.? Is it unpredictable? Does God have your very best, or is it one step forward and two steps backwards? Psalms 37:23 through 25 says, the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord, and he delighteth in his way. Though he fall, he shall not be utterly cast down, for the Lord upholdeth him with his hand. I have been young and now am old, yet I have not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. We do good and we get to take one step up and climb higher. But when we do not well, we are ordered to take two steps backwards. We help people and God lets us take a step up higher. But soon we talk about people and God makes us take two steps down. We go up by steps seemingly, and seemingly down by elevators. Too many live in a compromise instead of living committed lives. When we run with the world, live like the world, talk, walk, and act like the world, dress like the world, seek your entertainment in the world, etc. I feel like we're offering God brass instead of gold. When we get satisfied with the substitute instead of the genuine and accept the substitutes in this world instead of God's presence and power in our churches, I feel like we're living a compromised life. To me, that is like giving brass for gold. When we offer up our excuses instead of our obedience, then we're offering God brass in the place of gold. We're offering God less than our best. How would your wife feel instead of a gold wedding band you had gotten, or a brass band, or cubic zirconium? Are your treasures for sale? Let me read you this from 1 Kings 21, 1 through 17. And it came to pass after these things, that Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard which was in Jezreel, hard by the palace of Ahab king of Samaria. And Ahab spake unto Naboth, saying, Give me thy vineyard, that I may have it for a garden of herbs, because it is near unto my house, and I will give thee for it a better vineyard than it, if it seem good to thee. I will give thee the worth of it in money. And Naboth said unto Ahab, The Lord forbid me that I should give the inheritance of my father unto thee. Some things, my brothers, are just not for sale. And Ahab came in his house heavy and displeased because of the word which Naboth the Jezreelite had spoken to him. For he had said, I will not give the inheritance of my father. What have you got that you're going to sell out as for sale? And he laid down upon his bed and turned away his face and would not eat, and would eat no bread. But Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said, Why is thy spirit so sad that thou eatest no bread? And he said, Because I have spoke unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said to him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I'll give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel his wife said unto him, Dost thou not govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, let thy heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name, and sealed them with a seal, and sent his letters unto the elders and to the nobles that were in the city dwelling with Naboth. And she wrote in letters, saying, Proclaim a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people, and set his two sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him. And he set two men, sons of Belial, before him to bear witness against him, saying, Thou didst blaspheme God and the king. And then carry him out, and stone him that he may die. And the men of the city, even the elders and the nobles that were inhabitants in this city, did as Jezebel had sent unto them, and it was written in the letters which he had sent unto them. They proclaimed a fast, and set Naboth on high among the people. And there came in two men, children of Belial, and sat before him. And the men of Belial witnessed against him, even against Naboth, in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth did blaspheme God and the king. And they carried him forth out of the city, and stoned him with stones, that he died. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth is stoned and is dead. And it came to pass, when Jezebel heard that Naboth was stoned and was dead, that Jezebel said to Ahab, Arise, take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give thee for money, for Naboth is not alive but dead. And it came to pass, when Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, that Ahab rose down to the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite to take possession of it. I submit to you in conclusion, brothers and sisters, that some things are just not for sale. Is there anything in your life that you believe in strongly enough that you would die for it? There ought to be. When you're going into a court case, they most times give you an opportunity to settle. Sometimes someone refuses to settle no matter what the trouble, no matter what the cost. It's tragic when we always see around us all the time people settling for less. People have just made do with their life. We need to run with people that wouldn't take no for an answer. We need to be like the four men carrying the man with the palsy to Jesus. When they found the house full, they didn't take the man back home. They didn't settle for less, but instead tore off the roof. I want some tear off the roof people on my team. I want some people on my team that won't settle for less. How about you? If you settle for less, it's your own fault. The greatest human temptation is to settle for too little. Quote by Thomas Merton. Never settle on a life you don't want when God is trying to give you a better life. A quote by Shannon Alder. 10 years from now, make sure you can say that you chose your life. You didn't settle for it. A quote by Mandy Hale. When you refuse to settle for less than the best tends to track you down. Another quote by Mandy Hale. God is the enemy of great. Good is the enemy of great. Good is the enemy of great. I heard a story about a little girl who was watching her mother prepare a fish for dinner. Her mother cut off the head and the tail of the fish and placed it in the baking pan. The little girl asked her mother why she cut the head and tail off the fish, and her mother thought for a while and said, Well, I've always done it that way, and that's how my grandmother did it. Not satisfied with the answer, the little girl went to visit her grandmother to find out why she cut off the head and the tail before baking it. Grandmother thought for a while and said, Well, I don't know. My mother always did it that way. So the little girl and grandmother went to visit great-grandmother to find out if she knew the answer. Great-grandmother thought for a while and said, Because my baking pan was too small to fit the whole fish. How much more trouble would it have been just to buy a bigger, larger pan instead of settling for less fish? How many times have we compromised or settled or went after the smaller fish in life when it would not have required much more just to make room for bigger? Make up your mind today not to settle for less. The blind Bartimaeus, when he cried out towards Jesus, Jesus asked him the question that he always asks everybody. And he asked him, what should I do unto thee? And the blind man said that I might receive my sight. He could have settled for less. He could have said, if I could just read Braille, if I just had me a seeing eye dog. But he shot for the moon. He asked for his sight. If you shoot for the moon, you might hit a star if you miss. I'm reminded also of the story of Elijah and Elijah, where Elijah followed Elijah. And Elijah said, what would you want when I leave here? And Elijah said, a double portion of your spirit. Elijah didn't rebuke him for asking for a double portion. He didn't say, well, you'll never be half the man I am, much less be double. Elijah didn't say, well, I'd like a raise. I've been with you 10 years or something like that. He told him he wanted a double portion. So just whenever God asks you what you want, be sure to tell him what you want. Have a set of definite goals. If you don't know where you're going, how do you expect to ever get there? If you don't have a map, you might end up anywhere. There are get-by prayers, and there are, sure enough, bold prayers. A get-by prayer is, Lord, help me have enough to get by. A bold prayer is, Lord, help me have an abundance, so not only can I get by, but I can see that others get by too. A get-by prayer, that'd be, God, help me pay my bills. A bold prayer is, Lord, help me have enough to pay my bills with plenty left over to help others. To get by, a get-by prayer is help me to make it, and a bold prayer is not only help me to make it, but that I could help others too. Heard a story about a man that was in business and he needed more money on his loan. He dreaded calling his banker. In fact, he put it off to the last minute of the last day, and finally he called his banker. And he said, I hate to tell you this, but I need some more money. And the banker said, well, let me get this straight. If I don't loan you this extra money, then you won't be able to continue in business. And he said, that's right. And he said, if you don't continue in business, you can't pay me what you already owe me. And he said, I guess that's right too. And he said, well, you need to come on down here as soon as you can. Let's get this taken care of. He wanted to loan him the money all the time, but we assume that people don't want to do things for us. My prayer today is that we can all make it. May God wonderfully bless you until we meet here next time at this same time. My prayer to God is that as many as can will make it. Please phone, text, or email any comments to Dale Cantrell at 256-508-4410 or email me, DaleCantrell2@gmail.com. That's Dale Cantrell, DaleCantrell, all in lowercase, the number 2@gmail.com. Meridianville Holiness Church is located at 1285 Steger Road in Meridianville, Alabama 35759. But any notes or letters should be sent to 278 Priest Lane, Hazel Green, Alabama 35750. If you do not live in the Meridianville, Alabama area but would still be interested in attending a service near you, then contact me, Dale Cantrell. I will get you the nearest church location, closest to where you live and where you're at. May God bless you again.